All right, we'll call the meeting to order, starting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. First up on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting, November 11th, 2024.
I move to approve.
Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are moving forward. Next up on the agenda is our monthly transactions approval of general fund vouchers 81,852 through 81,929 and wire transfers 2025-0125 through 2025-0170.
I move to approve general funds and vouchers as written.
Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay, next up is public comments, and we have no public. So, moving on. Approval of resignations.
Okay, we just have one resignation. One of our bus drivers just no longer wishes to drive a full regular route, so Craig Moriak would like to resign from that. However, he will continue on, and he would like to still drive extracurricular routes and still act as a sub from time to time as well. So,
How long did he drive full time? Full regular
it's
route?
been about a year and a half, I think.
Do I have a motion to approve the resignations?
I approve the resignation.
I'll second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Next up, approval of hires.
Okay, so we do have a hire related to what we just covered. Fortunately, we do have another bus driver that we'd like to hire. She has Jamie Schultz has a number of years of experience driving bus in other districts in the surrounding area and connections to the community, living close by here. And she would begin working after her 2 weeks are up. Currently driving for Cobuson in New Richmond, and would work transitioning with Craig on, riding the route with him a few times, things like that. So she'd be starting here after December 17th.
Do I have a motion to approve the hires?
I'll make a motion to approve new hires. Second.
All right, properly moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next up, review of parent-teacher conferences.
Okay, so we had elementary conferences in November, a little bit later, like a week later than normal, just like everything else in November with the weird calendar this year. And then we had high school conferences on December 2nd last week as well. So I was just going to invite the principals to make a few comments about each of their conferences. I don't know who wants to go first. Teresa?
Yes. So parent-teacher conferences at the elementary are very well attended. We had 96% attendance. That was most in person. Some do require a phone call, and we did do a Zoom with another family, but it's a hustle and bustle those 2 nights, 4+ hours of lots of collaborative conversations. And this year, something hopefully that we get better at is 3rd through 6th grade does some goal setting now that's kind of connected with the forward exam, but it's really those habits, those learner habits that we really want to instill, but then they do get a little connection. If you personally improve upon your forward score, or if you as a grade level improve, then the following fall they get a little reward for that. So it's tying what great learners do with, hey, that really was, it connects. When I make that effort, I do better. So, and then it does fall at the end of a quarter, so then we obviously talk report card things and looking forward. Our next set of, and I'll just say this and then Mr. Melwer can take over, our next set of parent-teacher conferences this year, we're actually trying them in February. So it feels feels like they were kind of late, and then we bumped them into February. Won't be connected necessarily with a true end of quarter or end of semester, but we just felt by the time they rolled around in April, you know, you got like about a month, and you're talking about next year and what that's going to look like. So we still have some time, and it matches well with discussing some of our January testing that we'll be doing school-wide. So it's just a little bit more of a connection with the families.
We made a couple of changes this year with ours. Our participation from families has been low, which I think is pretty common in high schools as kids get older. And there's a little less participation, but also with technology now, we can track grades all the time. Our parents can track grades on a daily basis. So in order to try and have more meaningful conversations than just grade reports, we started earlier. We did one in September with some goal setting. Every kid in the building set an academic goal, and then we revisit those goals during RAP every month. And to give you an idea, in September we had 56 families that were here, and last year our high was like 33 families. So we saw that increase. And then this next one that we just did here a week ago, we saw 43 families. So we bumped it up a little bit. We're getting some participation, trying more with the communication piece, and setting those goals and having more conversations around academic career planning. We're kind of moving in that direction, and we're hoping those conversations are going to lead to increased participation in this building. But happy with the turnout we had the 2 days, and we hope we can do some things to increase that number.
So you're saying the next one's going to be on the career planning?
Well, the academic goals have to do with the academic career planning. So the one in September had to do with it. This one, we encourage to not only see your regular teachers, but also stop in to see your RAP teacher, check in on that goal. That's the academic career planning. The next piece for the one in February is we'll be talking about scheduling, and that's I'm going to try to encourage families to come in, because we will be starting the process here soon of getting the master schedule built for next year. So we want parents and students involved in that conversation when kids start picking their classes for the 25-26 school year. So sprinkling in the ACP stuff throughout.
And on that
It's just
goal,
hard to believe that's next year.
Talking, 25, 26, yeah.
on that goal sheet though, students do say what they want, like what they're aspiring to do. There is this whole section on what you aspire your career to be.
We typically go every time, and that one we happened to miss this year, and it just, I don't know what happened, but somehow we missed that.
September 1.
Yeah, and I never got to see my kids' goals or anything like that, so I don't
you could
know.
stop this time
If
here.
there's a way to follow up with that, or like tweak it or something. Not
So this
you,
last
but us, but
the goal, every time we have one, the RAP teachers have the goal sheets ready to go. So
RAP
anytime
teacher,
you're here,
yeah.
if you stop and see the RAP teacher and say, hey, I want to check in on their goal, they'll have it ready for you.
okay.
Or if you want to email the RAP teacher tomorrow, they'll communicate that with
Okay,
you.
it's good. to
They've
know.
got them.
Thanks.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't.
No, you're good.
It's new.
Yep.
All right.
Christy forgot to go the first time.
No, I went to both. That's why I know what's on it. And you as a parent, you can add
the first one
goals
I
to
ever
your
missed,
kid.
and
Yes, you can. A little bit of accountability.
Some of
there.
us did that.
Good.
Make it a little harder for them. All right, moving on to review of state report cards.
Okay, so yeah, there's a bunch of attachments there, and in the short time that we have tonight, we're not going to do a super deep dive into any of the cards, but that would take hours. But just want to do an overview, and there's a lot of great news to share, or a lot of really things that were really pleasing to see on there. So. And actually what I did is I made some paper copies of some stuff, because I just know when you're looking at all that, it's kind of hard on a screen. You get a little, you got the screen there, but also I just thought it's kind of nice to look at paper copies too. Yeah, Greg, there you go. Whoops. Got some for the principals here too.
Here. Yep.
I have
You want me to just take that?
Oh, that one's mine.
I
You got
have
it. Well, I got it. So on the front page is just kind of a summary. So every year, you know, the preliminary cards come out in November, and we do a little workshop usually with CISA that we always sign up for, because that's just a great review, take kind of a deep dive into them, remind yourself what all is on there. But then afterwards, we kind of made up just, you know, some high points. So if you look at that front page, so I think our big takeaway is, you know, again, we're continuing to see some nice response on the state testing. You know, we've been working for up to 5 years on implementing professional learning communities, and we feel like we're seeing, you know, changes in culture and instructional practices and data practices and assessment, and we feel like it's making an impact. So and I had a comment on there too, or a note about moving away from post-pandemic impacts. What I mean by that is it's a 3-year average that's used on the data, so with the heaviest weight on the most recent year. But, you know, we're kind of getting away from that, you know, 3 years, the 2021 year that was impacted post-COVID the most. That's kind of sunsetting in. Now, that doesn't mean to say that all the impacts of the kids, maybe some learning losses, has been, you know, erased. That's not what I'm saying. But the scores are kind of that weird year of 1920 where we didn't even take any, you know, tests at all. So we're kind of moving away from some of those weird data results in there. But on the if you flip to the next page, there are this is that historical document that I think I've showed you last year. It just went back 5 years, and under the 23-24 test, which is what this is, last year's test, there are 20 different boxes related to the high school, junior high, elementary, and district, and 16 out of the 20 had higher score than last year. You know, had improved, you know, growth over the last year, and some of them that didn't were like minuscule change. You know, they're basically even. You would call it no change. So really, a lot of things to be pleased about on there. So our district scorecard exceeded expectations for the first time in like 5 years. So 70 is the score cutoff, and remember, that's not a percentage; it's just a score number. So exceeded expectations for the first time in 5 years, which is awesome. High school continues overall steady progress, just shy of exceeds expectations at the overall 68.4, so very close to that 70, which is exceeds, so high end of meeting expectations, and benefiting from, you know, pretty good increases in growth and closing gaps scores. We'll get to that. And then the junior high also showed increases in every area, nearly every area from the prior year. We know that our middle school has only 2 grades, so there tends to be more volatility in their scores bouncing up and down year to year because it's just a small sample size of kids. But they're also, you know, again, less than a point away from exceeds expectations, which is great. Elementary card exceeds expectations for the 2nd year in a row. Up in the 75.8 range, so a 15-point increase over the last couple of years, which is just tremendous. Steady increase for 3 years in a row. 10-point achievement increase in 2 years. So just, and again, very strong growth in the growth and the closing gaps areas. And then while we were talking, kind of an emphasis on the workshop we did too, they talked a little bit about demographics, and so just out of curiosity, we pulled some demographic data and made a little extra chart on the bottom and just looked at our percentage of students with disabilities, our percentage of students who are English language learners, percentage of students who are economically disadvantaged, and you can kind of just see a little bit of trends there, a little bit of trending upward of number of kids with students with disabilities, definitely trending upward of percentage of kids who are English language learners. Again, it's still a very small number of kids though, so if you go from 2 to 4, that's a big increase. But still, the resources that are needed to help those learners. Economically disadvantaged, we're kind of holding steady right around that 38 to 40 mark is where we tend to be. So those were some of the highlights. I just made notes at the bottom too, just reminding, how does the state report card connect with our strategic plan? Well, we know it's one of the pieces of data that we look at. It's an important piece of data, but we also know it's not the sole definer of a good, successful school. But it's something to measure, and we look for trends over time. And again, we're pleased with the trend we're seeing right now. It's a one-day in time performance. We have pretty small sample sizes, so we look at those trends. And then, let's see, the other thing to be aware of, some changes in the 23-24 state report cards. if you've seen some of this on the news perhaps, or maybe if you get, you know, the WASB newsletters or things like that, they did change, what do they call it? They call the cut scores. So the cut score is so the score is a 4, 3, 2, or 1 is how the students are rated on how they do, and they changed what the line is between a 4 and a 3 and a 3 and a 2 and a 2 and a 1. Back in 15, when we had the new forward exam, the cut scores were set, I would say, very rigorously. They're set at the same level as the National Assessment Educational Progress, the NAEP test, which is a very rigorous, high standard. You know, and some would argue that it's been really high. Like I've seen some examples of kids where they scored in the 90th percentile in English, you know, in the elementary school, and they weren't a 4. You know, so it was a real high mark. So this past spring and summer, the DPI put a team together and they reset the cut scores. That's been controversial. You know, some people charge that, well, you're lowering the standards, you're dumbing it down, you're lowering the bar. Other people say we're lowering the bar to where it should be, you know, to more appropriate, more realistic. So that's been controversial. And then they also changed the names of the labels. Instead of advanced, proficient, basic, and below basic. I can't even remember what they are right now. You guys remember what they are? Advanced. Approaching, developing. I can't remember what they are.
Advanced, median, approaching, developing.
Thank you very much. I personally think it was like maybe not the best idea to change the cut score and the names in the same year. You know, I think it just made it more muddied. But anyway, one thing that they found when they updated the cut scores, that there were so many schools that scored so much better that basically put most every school in the state at, you know, exceeding expectations or far exceeding expectations. And so they did what they called a corrective factor, and they took, you know, kind of did the whole distribution like it normally is, and kind of adjusted the scores downward. So you got a lot of districts who did quite well on the tests, or who are up in arms saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, we scored really well. So there's that. Again, it's controversial, but I just remind people that these state report cards are a political creation. They were created, you know, 10, 15 years ago as a political, you know, thing. You know, people use them for good things. People use them for not so good things, stacking up schools against each other and so on. So it is what it is. But we put the data in perspective best we can. But again, we're pleased with the growth and the improvement that we're seeing. On that second page of the historical, again, it breaks it down. And then what I did is in the packet, the paper packet, I have the full district report card, just so you can kind of be reminded what one looks like and what all is in there. And then I just did the cover pages of the high school, junior high, and elementary school, so you see that cover summary. But if you're looking at the district one, just a reminder, what goes into the cards is, you know, at the top you got demographics in terms of, you know, racial, ethnic, disabilities, economically disadvantaged, English language learners. You have your score summary. And then you have 4 different areas that make up the scorecard. You have achievement score, which is just raw, you know, how many kids met the benchmark or not. You have growth, which measures students from one year to the next, individual students, how they grow. And then it also sets a comparison against all the other students in the state, and they find the average growth for all students across the state. They set that as a 3.0, and then anything above a 3 means you are growing faster than other students. And again, they compare students with disabilities to students with disabilities, English language learners with English language learners, so on. So it's an apples to apples. But what we see there is that's across our schools right now is we have really good growth going on. So we're beating, as a general rule, we're beating the state average in growth right now, which is great to see. Target group outcomes takes the lowest achieving students in the school, and then basically kind of does a separate achievement, growth, absenteeism, graduation rate. It's like a separate little scorecard for the lowest. And they say, well, you know, why? You might say, why do you take the lowest performers and put them in a group? Well, what they're trying to track is, are you closing gaps between your students who struggle and the rest of your students? So that's why they do that. And then the last part is on track to graduation. So there is research about, you know, 3rd grade reading score is an indicator of on track to graduation. 8th grade math is an indicator of on track to graduation. And then, of course, at the high school, they actually look at graduation rates, and then across all grades they look at absenteeism level, chronic absenteeism. So that's, those bar graphs across the bottom. The light blue bar shows the state average, and then the dark blue bar shows our particular district or the particular school that you're looking at. So
that chronic absenteeism, is that a good score being that high, or
so the higher the number, the better.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yes. The higher the number, the better. Yep. And I hesitate to say I don't believe that's a percentage. It might be. That one is a percent out of about 100.
A score of 90 I believe would tell you that 10% of our kids are missing more than 10% of school for any reason.
Sure.
Which then they say is going to affect their ability to graduate.
That's how they define chronic absenteeism, as absence for 10% or more of days. Doesn't matter the reason. They could all be excused. They could all be legitimate reasons, but
Right.
it's just they're saying the correlation between not being here. So, any overall questions?
Days of school again.
175. Yeah, so 10%.
10% is like
17, 18 days. That's a lot. Mhm. That's quite a bit. Questions? Comments overall?
Congratulations.
Yeah. Good job.
It's awesome.
It's it's a lot of hard work by a lot of people,
And did you say we still do have a little bit of the COVID thing in this data?
I mean, I'd say everybody's still, students probably are still, particularly in math, is what you read about is the most is that students are still trying to come back from some of that learning loss in math. But the data is kind of sunsetting away from, the last 3 years, it's a 3-year average now, and now that 2021 school year is it, am I right? That's out of the right. Yeah, is
so
out
we
of
still have
the
21,
is out of the
22.
mix. Yeah, is out of the mix. 2021 was the year after the closure. Everyone wearing masks, lots of absenteeism. Everyone quarantined, stuff.
Fun times.
Yeah, and a miss. And then 1920 was missing basically a quarter of school.
Yeah.
Almost. So, but yeah, it's a lot of hard work by a lot of people. A lot of investment from our staff and our leaders. A couple of them right here. So
Yeah, congratulations, guys. All right, should we move on?
I think so.
All right, next item of business then is the review of the 24-25 budget status.
Okay, so part of what we have said we wanted to do, talking about planning and so on, is just to do check-ins like mid-year and then more often as we get into the spring with budget status. We've also talked a little bit about how we're going into a bit more of a normal type of budget world without ESSER anymore, and so the first document on there is just a summary of year-to-date spending by objects. And what I did is just to highlight the totals under each category. And so to look at that, comparing current fiscal year 24-25 with the last year's activities for 23-24. So this is a mark in time, November 30th. And Eve ran this off Skyward, and it just shows, I think the most important thing is to look at the percentage of your year-to-date budget spent now compared to percent last year. And you're just looking for things that are way out of whack, and there's nothing that
So
stood
we're
out.
less than half, so we'd be expecting 35 to 40% spent in most categories.
Yeah, and it depends.
I mean, if it was evenly.
Yeah, and a lot of things in schools aren't evenly
Yeah.
spent, like some things are real heavy at different times of the year. So, and it doesn't pay to look at, not like a business where you look at profit and loss and
No.
bottom line every month, because our revenues come in at odd schedules throughout the year, but our expenditures tend to be more consistent with our
It's
payroll.
just if salaries were 75% spent and we're in November, we'd have
We have a little bit of a concern there. Yeah.
How did you feel when these came out, Chris, when you took a look at them?
Again, looking for oddball, like things that are way out of whack, and looks, in many cases we are more, I'd say, ahead of the game, underspent from compared to last year, which I think is good. So, and that's even I looked at it together, and yeah, nothing that jumped out at us as a real concern. But
So-
again, a few things that were kind of encouraging.
What percentage was ESSER funds last year?
Ooh, I don't know. I can't say that off the top of my head. What percentage of our budget? Yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you that off the top of my head.
And I think that's hard because you were doing special projects or special curriculum. It wasn't really a budget
Yeah.
for regular line items.
Right. I'm just saying if we were to take that percentage out, that's probably
Yeah.
what we should be,
Well,
hopefully by the end of the year, pretty close to being.
yes, but no, because again, a lot of the stuff we did with ESSER was things that we wouldn't normally buy. you
Yeah,
know?
it's not.
So
Yeah, it wouldn't.
it wasn't like a replacement of a big part. It replaced some of our budget, but not.
Right.
It's and in fact next month I'm going to have a budget or a ESSER final report for you. We're trying to put it in like layperson's terms and just to see a nice summary. Like, hey, here's all the stuff we did with this hundreds of thousands of dollars that we got the last 3 years because we did some cool things. So we're going to bring that to you next month. So, and in fact, Lori. It's one of the things she's helping on because she was the one who did so much ESSER.
Yeah.
When Eve came on board, she said, "I'm not really going to train you or show you much on ESSER because it's going away, so there's no point in putting you through that." I think she said. So, but yeah, I don't know. Any questions on what you see there or?
We didn't get done with practice till 7:45. I got it. You take it up with Jason.
He's sorry.
We heard.
Any questions about anything you see on there? Or we'll do that, more often, or do it again here as we get into the spring more. We'll look at that more. And then, if there's no questions on that, the second part was to just talk about having some keywords at key times, to use that phrase, with our levy. As tax bills come out here for individuals, and we did see an increase in our levy this year that was definitely more significant than we've seen the last couple of years. And so what we tried to do is put together just some facts, for you as board members to just kind of arm you with information. And when I set out to do this, I thought I would make it a real nice, simple document. Well, then, it's not a simple topic. So trying to get adequate information on there at the same time. So I guess the goal of this is to just, for you all as board members to be informed, to have a resource to look back to. If someone asks you questions, here's some data you can look at. But here's the other thing too, is if you have constituents who ask you questions, you can try to help, obviously, as I know you do. You can also say, hey, you know what, sounds like, why don't you give a call to Chris or email Chris and set up a meeting with him, and I'd be happy to meet with anybody, of course, to talk over their tax bill or the levy or why things are the way they are. The big takeaways, we knew at the annual meeting we were projecting a decent increase in the levy already, and then we had some unexpected, I don't want to say surprises, I guess. October is when some of that information comes out, and some of the highlights. We talked about this at the special meeting in October. What we had a $155,000 decrease in our state general aid. So what that means is, we have a whole amount of money, our total revenue limit authority. That's the amount of money based on the number of kids we have that we're allowed to raise in total. And then part of that pie is made up of state general aid, and part of that pie is made up of local tax levy. And when you get less state general aid, then that means the slice of pie from the local levy gets bigger. So not only did we have an increase in our revenue limit authority, so we were allowed to levy more, we were allowed to have more revenue this year, but then we also, a bigger chunk of it ended up coming from local because the state aid went down more than we expected.
Yeah, I thought we were supposed to be positive in state aid this year, in contrast to last.
Well,
or were we with just not 150, just to the tune of 154 less than we thought it was going to
We're still positive. We still get more of our, we still get 67% of our aid comes from the state. It's just that 67% was 77% 4 years ago. And so it's part of the decrease. Why does it decrease? I kind of tried to address that in here because One is our property values in Clear Lake have grown faster than across the state. Now, we're still not property rich compared to so many places, but our property values the last 2 years, not this year, but the 2 prior years, grew at 17% and 21% and beat the state average. So that's a part of it. The other thing is, when we passed that referendum, we allowed our district more revenue limit authority. So we get to raise more money. Not all of it is state aided. You know, so again, 70% of that is state aided. The other 30% does go on our local levy. Now, the other thing though is that I think as board members you can remind people that we have a pretty decent increase this year. However, the last 2 years, and if you were to look at the second attachment that I put on there, it's let's see,
Historical expense.
Thank you, Greg. Historical expenses and levies. You know, if you go back, so toward the bottom of that page, but at the bottom it's, you know, it's got bolded total levy and then the percent change in levy. We see a pretty significant increase this year. But if you look at the last 2 years, you know, we passed that referendum in the spring of 22, and then that fall, you know, we kept our promise and we didn't raise the levy. And in fact, we dropped it just a few dollars. And then last year, we only raised the levy, you know, $40-some thousand. So I understand, you know, you can tell people, I understand there's a bigger increase this year, but, you know, over the last 3 years, it averages out to about 5.5%. That doesn't necessarily, you know, for not everyone, that's not necessarily going to make everyone feel better. But if you put it in historical perspective, you know, we were at averaging 7% increases, 6-7% for the 4 years prior to that. So it is a little bit of a. And then the other part too, as I highlighted in pink up on the top there, you know, our expenses budgeted this year are actually less than last year. So that's another thing you can remind people. It's like, we're not raising this money because we're spending, you know, we're looking to spend more money. We're actually, you know, decreasing our spending a little bit. Some of that is from the ESSER money going away. And, you know, it's ESSER money going away, but still we do have new expenses. You know, utilities cost more, salaries and benefits cost more. So yeah, our expenses do increase every year like every other school or every other business. But we're actually budgeted to spend less than last year, so that's another thing you can share with people. If I go back to that first document, the keywords document too, again, just to highlight the ones in yellow are ones that were sort of, you know, we didn't find out till mid-October. The decrease in state aid, we didn't get that final number till then. The other one is we had a unexpected, pretty massive increase in private voucher school student levy. To the tune of a $76,000 increase. So, you know, 4 years ago we had $0 spent on private voucher school students, and we now levied $195,000 for private voucher school students. So that is not an expense to our district. Our district does not lose money, but, you know, that there's roughly, we don't know who, or we can't know who or how many or whatever, or what ages, but we can guess there's 15 to 17 students in our district who are attending private voucher schools somewhere, perhaps online, I don't know. But so those students their parents get a voucher, and they can use that from the state, and they can use that to pay for the private school, and that does come from our tax levy. So as a district, we get expensed that amount of dollars, but then we are allowed to levy it as a non-recurring levy exemption. So, you know, so you need to levy it because you're gonna pay for it. You have to have the expense, so you have to levy that amount of dollars. So that's $195,000 that we levy our local taxpayers for, you know, students attending private schools elsewhere. It was $0 in 2020, 2021. So just that's a change, and that's not unique to Clear Lake. You know, districts across the state are experiencing that. But the increase this year, just the change from last year to this year, was a $76,000 increase. That was unexpected. The prior year open enrollment, we talked about this at the October special meeting. These are students who we did not get credit for, did not get money for in 23-24. So it's a handful of kids. but where, they move between districts and we don't know they exist, and we don't find out until after the third Friday count or after the January count, and so we get a credit for them the following year. Well, again, you get to take that as a revenue limit exemption one time, and you need to do it, you want to do it. So that was unexpected. Some years we have nothing, some years we have 10,000 or 20,000. This year we had 54,000. And then the other one that was, again, unexpected, not a bad thing, but transfer of service levy, we have, you're allowed to apply for money, special monies for, let's say you have a student who has high-cost special needs, certain criteria if they're a new student to your district, or students who are English learners that are new to your district. You can apply for transfer of service money. We did get some dollars for that, $16,000. We don't know those. We didn't get all that till that latter part. So that's just kind of some of what goes into that increase. It is what it is. It's a larger increase from past years, but I wanted to provide this document to just give people information, for you to have information. Another thing at the bottom of the page, I almost forgot, this thing called the school levy tax credit. So you'll hear this talked about. So this is not something that the district does, but it's something that the municipalities do. So it's the Department of Revenue, it's a property tax release from the Department of Revenue, and then after all the levies have been determined, they distribute out money to the municipalities based on property value, and then it's used to then offset the overall tax bills in those municipalities. So there was a 7% increase in our levy tax credit in the district this year. That doesn't mean it's 7% equally across the municipalities. But that's something that gets distributed out as well to help mitigate some of the increases every year. So underneath that, if you scroll down, I just try to put in graphic form a bunch of the stuff that is in the top there. Again, it can be a lot of information, but I know that if you want to dive into it and really look at it, or people are asking you questions, hey, what about this or that? It's just a resource for you to have, and again, give you a paper copy. Some of it is just from our annual meeting. I just updated some of the graphs and charts from the annual meeting. But you can see some of the trends with equalization aid, bopping down here this year, and other trends like our mill rate, our tax rate, our mill rate is still historically low. I mean, it dipped really low last year, and it went up a little bit again this year, but still, so I think it's about page 2. Yeah, it's the second page. There's a nice bar graph there that shows our mill rate is still, declining, and that's a function of our property values increasing a fair amount for the last number of years. So that last document that's really in depth. I just, in case I had that on there, in case anybody had questions about revenue limit history. But again, I would stress that if anyone has a lot of deep questions and you don't feel comfortable answering, you can always refer them to say, hey, why don't you go talk to Chris, set up a meeting or call or whatever. Other comments or questions that all of you have?
Looks good.
Okay.
Good thing to have, because I'm sure once taxes come out, you guys you're gonna hear about it this time, I think. So.
And also, if any of you are looking at that later and you're saying, hey, wait a minute, what does this mean? Just call me or come in. Just anytime, happy to talk about it.
I think it was last year we didn't levy as much as we could have.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, the fact that we've been fiscally responsible all the way along and kind of the victim of a number of things, I guess will be our story.
Much of it's out of our control. That is exactly right.
Okay. Any other questions on the budget? And then we'll move on to the next item of business, consideration and approval of compensation for completion of retired Act 20 literacy training.
Okay, so it was actually a year ago we did a little presentation about Act 20 last December, and that's the new law that was enacted requiring certain ways, I'm just going to keep it real simple, requiring certain methods of teaching and approaches for early literacy and assessments and responses to learning or responses to students not being on track, pre-K through 3rd grade. Part of it is teachers and grades, not pre-K, right, but K through 3, right, Mrs. Anderson? K through 3. Is that right? There's a pre-K. It's K, isn't it?
Pre-K is involved in some testing, but not necessarily individual plans.
They don't have to have the
They
training.
don't have to have the training.
Potentially, no.
Yeah. So K through 3 is required by this law, so I will call this an unfunded mandate. So there's a list of different trainings that the legislation says are acceptable. In our district, we did something called Top 10 Tools. And last year, basically almost all of our elementary teachers signed up to do it. We used ESSER funds to pay for the cost of the training. And then we also used ESSER funds to pay everyone who completed it a $500 stipend. And Mrs. Anderson, just can you give a really brief, like, how many hours involved in that training?
50 plus hours. And then in addition, we met monthly to discuss each of the tools. There were 10 of them, and had a discussion on how to utilize it in the classroom. And so there was, in addition to the actual online piece, there were meetings happening all last year.
Yeah. So I guess my point being, there's the teachers do a lot of their own time on this. So we were weighing, okay, do we continue with the stipend? I feel it's fair. They're required to do this training outside of their normal work hours, and so again, we paid for it with ESSER funds last year. I think going forward, we're going to need to continue to offer that. Is my recommendation. I also know, though, it's going to be onesie-twosies going forward. Like one new teacher, 2 new teachers, or maybe someone from another district coming in may already have the training from somewhere else. So it shouldn't be a huge expense. But so thinking about, okay, the best way to do this, and so we felt that just putting it right into the compensation model. So if you click on the attachment, this is our teacher compensation model that you guys look at from time to time. And on the second page, there's a section about supplemental pay, and so I just added in a box there for supplemental pay for, as it says, the wording, completion while employed by the district of approved training for teachers of reading as required by Act 20. And they would get $500 non-base building stipend paid upon completion. And we were clear to put in there, we looked at the wording, that they have to complete it. It needs to be done while they're employed by the district. So if they come in with the training from somewhere else, we don't pay them a $500 stipend. It needs to be the approved training, and it's for teachers of reading and that are required by Act 20. So not just any teacher would say, I want to do this training and get $500. I don't think they're lining up to do that. If they don't have to, but it's just try to make it clear that it's, specified for the requirement for Act 20. So I guess I would propose that we continue to offer some compensation for that time.
How much does the training itself cost?
$500 too.
Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I vote to approve the $500 stipend for Act 20 training.
Second?
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve the compensation for Act 20 training. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Next item of business is the review of the board and superintendent annual calendar.
Okay, so this is something I just wanted to share with you all. Something I've been working on and off at different points. And when I started here in this job, Mr. Ernst had a nice document that he had that was a board calendar overview, and then there was also a superintendent calendar overview. And just with some of the strategic plan work, and just some of the way that we do our policy reviews and so on, I thought I just had a different idea for how we could maybe structure it. And so been working on and off on this for a while, But if you look at the board one, and I call it a draft because I think it's always ongoing, and also too, as board members, if you look at it now or in the future and say, hey, you missed this, or don't forget to put this on there, I think it's always a working document. But so try to just divide it across the months. What are some of the highlights that, kind of requirements that happen every year that, so this is just more of the high level things, requirements. It's not the day-to-day tasks necessarily of the board, or day-to-day tasks. Like there's a superintendent calendar too. It's not the day-to-day tasks or the little things, managerial things, but this is more like the big requirements. So put it in categories of policy review, board professional development, the reports that are brought to the board at different times of the year, nice summary of that. And a lot of that is our pillars of our strategic plan reports, but it's also other types of reports that the board needs to hear as well. School community connections for the board, things like the annual meeting and open houses and conferences and things like that. And then also the far right column is just financial highlights, so things like approving the preliminary budget in the annual meeting, and but then also other miscellaneous things like approvals of Start College Now, or election timetables, things like that. So this is just meant to be sort of a roadmap for me, for the board. It's up to me to monitor the board calendar and make sure that we're on track with our agendas and what we're planning for ahead of time for months. And you can see the way the year ebbs and flows in certain areas, right? There's certain times of the year where it's real heavy in policy. There's certain times of the year where it's more heavy with strategic plan reports. Certain times of the year where it's a lot of, connections with community, so on. So just that's an update that I have been working on. And then the other one, the superintendent calendar, similar, just more of what, again, I need to monitor this and make sure that I'm hitting the marks on, hey, looking ahead, it's my roadmap for the year to plan ahead for what's coming. Policy reviews and superintendent professional development, school community connections for me specifically, and a lot of stuff under the budget and state reporting. So all the blue things, all the blue items are reports that are due to the state, like third Friday count, or annual report, or budget report, or transportation report, stuff like that. And then other miscellaneous things, just, again, planning and management throughout the year of a lot of what goes on. So again, I call that a draft because there's always things to add or change, and there's some items on here that are listed for a certain month, and maybe some years they might happen a month earlier or a month later, depending on how the calendar falls, or maybe an adjustment of when the health insurance bids come in. If they come in earlier, we might look at them earlier, but if they're coming in a little bit later, we might look at them later. But this is just kind of the roadmap for success, I guess. So just wanted to share that with you, and it's a reference for the board too. Comments on that, or questions, or
Is there something we don't know about in May?
let's see, in May for a wedding. Planned retirement party. Not mine.
Not yours, okay.
That's funny. Yeah.
So if there is one, he doesn't forget.
Yeah.
We didn't have one last year. We didn't have any retirements last year.
Nice.
So,
Well,
what
we
else is
did,
there?
but she didn't want to party.
What's that?
We did, but she didn't want to party.
Yeah, Lori did. Yeah, Lori refused to have. Yeah, Lori refused any recognition at all. And plus, we knew she was going to be helping us out a little bit here. Maybe after she retired in December, she helped us out. So, one thing too, like under the board calendar too, the policy review. Like I wrote I'd put the Neola stuff in there for 24. This is because that's the calendar we're on now. Like other years, we've had it more like October, November. Some, it just kind of depends when they put out their updates. This year, the Title IX thing was a big focus for them and took a lot of their time, and so it kind of pushed the rest of the timeline back. So that's always sort of flexible when the Neola updates come out. So speaking of which, we got a few of those yet tonight. So anyway, if you got input on that or comments, pass them along, please.
Okay. Next item of business, discussion of the WASB state Education Convention.
Okay, just kind of our last reminder here. So I've got Matt, Corey, and Nettie planning to attend. And then we do
Is that the right dates? Shouldn't there be 22nd?
Yeah, it should be. Oh, I thought I thought I fixed it too.
Okay, just
So
one.
it is the wrong dates. So what happened is 2 months ago, I copy forward meetings to start building agendas, and then this is from, so if you go back to the November meeting, the dates are right, and I thought I had pasted over that, so I apologize for that.
Just want to make sure I'm taking it right.
Yeah. The rest of that's right. It is the 22nd through 24th.
You're going a week late.
Thank you.
It's only 3 days, maybe I can go then.
Yeah. Well, it is still only 3 days, but and then I got some questions for those of you going about some hotel stuff, some weird stuff that came out. The Hilton has got renovations going on, and apparently they just decided a month beforehand to email us and say, oh, we're not able to keep all your reservations, and so they rescheduled us at another hotel. So I'll talk to you guys about some options that we might have. So anyway, but just a reminder that's coming up here.
All right, next item of business is, where are we? Discussion of the 24-25 District Administrator Evaluation Timeline.
So I noted in there just kind of what we did the last couple of years, put it out as a discussion item here in December, talked about the timeline. I think last year we sent out the Google form. Do you want it sent out? You guys tell me, do you want it sent out before Christmas break or right after Christmas break? And then I think at the January meeting, we kind of talked, and I shared kind of information from my end as far as things that I felt like were goals and things that I was working on and things that I feel like we've accomplished and goals going forward. And then I think then the president compiled it in later January, and in February is when we kind of did the final review. So do you want it sent out after Christmas, before Christmas?
Sooner the better.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
Sooner?
too. Sooner.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, any questions on the timeline? All right, then we'll move on to our next item of business. Review of the school board election timetable.
And again, just making sure we're continuing to have this out there, public awareness, as we should, just for making sure people are aware of the, if anybody does want to file for candidacy, they've got till January 7th, 5 p.m. that day. That's the deadline. And then come January, we'll draw a ballot order for whatever candidates we have. So. And as we know, Matt's up for re-election this year. He's the only one. So.
Okay. Then, seeing no more questions, we'll move on to the next item of business, which is the board policy updates and approvals. First reading.
Okay, so this batch here, I think we can move through in a relatively fast manner. There's not a lot of substantive changes in here. And then, while I'm thinking of it too, so I don't forget later, there's a big round of technical updates, letter C, that are just listed there. I'll have them listed next month too. The technical updates, if you recall, there's no real change to the policy. It's wording or clarifications, or maybe they add a legal reference, things like that. So there's no real substantive, for sure, not a change to what the policy means in those technical updates. So for these, this 33.2 update version, there's there's I don't know how many here, quite a few right here, and then there's another half of this round. When I spoke to Ed from Neola, I thought this was going to be a smaller round, or he thought it was too, but it's definitely not. There's a lot of things. So you want to just kind of rip through them real fast, or hit any highlights? The first one about meetings. Again, any changes or updates are highlighted in green. This one, the emphasis is that clarification on virtual participation has to be approved by the board, and it may be okay, illness or other specific
I
things.
thought we did this one last year.
We did, yeah, I think we did, yeah.
Yeah, that was
And then
good.
it clarified if you have like quasi-judicial functions like an expulsion or a termination hearing, whether or not, it would be permitted after consultation with legal counsel. So that's kind of a new addition there too. And then also, if there's a closed session and someone's participating virtually, they need to represent that there's nobody else in the room listening. So, any questions on that one? District-sponsored trips is the next one, 2340. And so, okay, so you've got district-sponsored trips. And okay, if you look out at the agenda, letter B, they kind of combine together a few different things related to transportation of students into a couple different policies. So, district-sponsored trips. This gives clarification about international field trips, that there's special considerations with that, and things that need to be in place before, and then those get approved by the board, any kind of international trip. And then trip approval process, again, to just make sure that it goes through the approval process through administration before it's shared with kids, and then also that it requires board approval, and what they need to make sure that they include for approval. And then if you scroll down, I should say, transportation for field and other district-sponsored trips, again, it's just clarifications. And a lot of this is coming in from other policies that they're combining together. But if we take field trips or transportation for students, that it's, the type of vehicle needs to be owned by the district, appropriate drivers that are approved.
So, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is for international only, or all trips?
This is for any field trip.
Any field trip that's overnight?
Yep. And then, doesn't need to be overnight, it's just a day field trip to the Science Museum is included in this policy too.
And that still needs to be approved by?
Nope,
Not
not by the board, just the international section, that's
Just the
new,
international.
that's the part that's approved by the board, yep, the international part, yep, sorry. Yep.
Does this, this particular, what we're looking at, don't we ever have teachers that just have a couple of kids hop in the car with them and go someplace?
We generally
At
try
times.
not to. It's legal to do that, but we try to avoid that. We try to always have them be in a school vehicle and driven by an employee. It is legal to have a kid ride in a staff member's personal car, but it's highly discouraged, and usually you would need to have parental permission and I think insurance permission. If we have somebody drive one of our school vehicles who's not an employee, we seek the permission of our insurance carrier and just get them approved. If it's a parent volunteer, let's say. So.
Okay.
All trips are supervised by members of the staff. Anytime students are on the vehicle, at least one sponsor, chaperone, or staff member is expected to ride in the vehicle and supervise students. Basic stuff. Again, some of this in here is because it's being brought in. It's not anything new or earth-shattering. It's just being brought in from other policy. So, getting appropriate approval from administration.
The one thing that isn't in here is this travel during the school year? So I think about like some of the FFA stuff, like the Washington DC trip, state convention, those all happen typically outside of the 180 school days. So do those trips fall under this policy?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
this is any school travel in the summer school year,
Okay.
anytime. Yep.
So like band trips.
Yep.
FFA.
Yep. sometimes during coach contact days, the wrestling team used to take vans and go to a team camp, when they have
Yep.
their coach contact
Yep.
days. So that would be that school-sponsored
Okay.
transportation.
It's just not really specified in here.
Well, and I think just being silent on it, is meant to imply that it's all covered.
Yeah.
No designation between school year and non-school year. Should I move on?
Do these
Yeah.
policies get shared with the appropriate teachers? I'm just thinking some take more trips than others.
Like when I go through this, when I review them with our Neola rep, or at times, there's certain ones we bring in more stakeholders to get input. Typically, you're going through and you're picking which options you want.
Yeah.
And what we're typically doing is we're picking, well, here's what we already do.
Okay.
So it's in few cases are we really, updating a policy where it's like, whoa, that's a radical shift from what we used to do. Sometimes we are, and then we have to make sure we communicate that. But in a lot of cases, it's just like picking the options that reflect, well, here's what we do right now. So we're just gonna.
But I'm asking the question, if what we do right now is not technically written, if it's
Mhm.
just, this is what we've always done, how would a new teacher know that these are the rules that you would need to follow?
Mhm.
Because think about it, we've had new teachers in those areas, how are they just gonna know
Mhm.
what somebody who's been here 25 years just knows?
Yeah, good question.
Like, there's just a conscious effort to make sure that they're in the know as these things
Yeah.
change.
So when we do the orientations with new staff and new teachers, we try to cover most
I know.
everything. But then also, the thing we always stress is, anytime you're doing something new, ask. Just ask. Go ask Brian. Go ask Teresa. Go ask the secretary. Just if you're not sure what to do, always ask. That's what we always say. Because even if we do share it with them, say in August, they may not remember in December when they go to
Yes.
plan their first field trip. So we always just say, just ask.
And by the way, here's a 6-inch 3-ring binder for you to study.
Yeah.
Right. And if it makes them feel any better, we have to go look at policy sometimes
I know,
too and
it's
say,
just-
wait a minute, okay, is that, I do it all the time, with staff leave days, I have to go sometimes look, okay, what category is this? Or, okay, what are the rules related to this? I have to do it all the time. So. Yeah, good questions. The next one, employment of personnel for co-curricular. Again, this just, there's really nothing new in here. It's just clarifies some language about how we select our co-curricular advisors and coaches. And then again, it doesn't reflect anything we don't already do. And we always bring them to the board. I always bring them to the board for approval. Questions on that one?
Next.
Student supervision and welfare. The part in there is a clarification on letter H. Staff. This is not new language. Staff members are discouraged from engaging students in social media and online networking media. Except for, and then the new word is except for appropriate academic, extracurricular, and/or professional use consistent with these other technology policies. So, for example, the band or the football team has a social media page that they use to promote, like, hey, we have football camp June whatever to whatever, so that's, so it's not technically correct to say that there could be no interaction with students on social media, because they do post, on a Facebook page or maybe an Instagram page saying, hey, don't forget, sign up for camp, or, get your t-shirt sales done, stuff like that. So, but just clarifying the parameters of it, I guess. That one's pretty cut and dry, I think. And then 4213 is, so one of them is teaching staff, one of them is support staff or administrative staff, so it's the same darn language. For 4213, it's the same thing. For 5200 attendance, I gotta remember now what this highlight is here. Oh, the only change is if you go on, there's one green, there's one green on page 2.
Calendar days.
Instead of, they clarified calendar days instead of 30 days. So, because I suppose someone would interpret it as school days. That's the only change there. 5505, academic honesty, and some clarification of language. And then there was also some clarification on artificial intelligence, and there were some options in there. So if you scroll down to the second, third page, we rejected a lot of there's a big section there about artificial intelligence. It was very restrictive, where it basically said students may only use artificial intelligence in these specific instances. Whereas the language what we currently have in our policy that we did last year, and that's more up above, is saying that it clarifies that artificial intelligence is not to be used in areas where it's not allowed or to cheat. But the language down below, in my opinion, and we're going to be going to Slate Technology Conference the next few days, and we're hoping to get also some really nice ideas for AI policies in a practical sense to use with kids and teachers, and come to an understanding more of our philosophical approach. But actually, the stuff on the bottom that was not chosen is very restrictive, and I think would paint us into a corner with the use of AI. So that's going to be an ongoing. I expect we'll have an AI update every year for the next how many updates, probably, because it's such an evolving thing. But certainly we don't want kids using AI to cheat, but we want kids to learn the power of using AI appropriately to help them be better learners, and teachers to be better teachers, and everyone to be more efficient. So. 5610, suspension and expulsion. This talks about exclusionary, so it says exclusionary discipline is appropriate to address serious misconduct or when alternatives such as in-school suspension or restorative practices have been ineffective to address a student's repeated refusal or neglect to obey school rules. So when they talk about exclusionary discipline, they're talking about suspension out of school or expulsion out of school. And then the part that was rejected, that was a part that specified that the board basically discouraging the use of any exclusionary discipline for students in second grade or below. Well, the statement right above it covers it anyway. Basically, as a philosophy, we're saying we don't exclude kids unless we feel like it's for a safety or a real serious issue. Why put a specific grade level on it? I mean, every case is going to be so different. So, and the rest of it is just reflecting current law. So there's nothing to note there, I don't think.
So when we have behavioral issues with like a little teeny kid,
Mm-hmm.
and they're kicking the teacher or kicking the whoever and swearing and cussing and destroying rooms, and why don't they get expelled?
Well, sometimes they get suspended. They often get suspended. Kind of our discussion we had last summer at our when we did our retreat. There could be cases where a young child could be expelled, but then we have to weigh out what's best for the child, what's best for the safe school environment. And typically with an expulsion, as this, you guys all know from you guys have been part of expulsion hearings before, it's does the child present an ongoing safety issue? Is developmentally appropriate for their age and their development? Is expulsion going to be the right answer to solve the problem? Is the question we always have to ask. I suppose I've not seen one in my career personally, but could there be a case where a second grader needs to be expelled? I suppose there could be. I haven't seen it yet, but it could happen, I suppose. Obviously, we're trying to work with students, work with parents to help the child function.
So the child is the first and foremost reason why we tolerate.
It's a balance though too. Yeah, I mean, you can't say it's all for the individual, because obviously we have to have the safety of others in mind and safety of the staff in mind.
Are there other resources for a child like that would get expelled? I mean, what happens to them?
Well, I can speak to, I don't know, you guys can chime in, feel free. Like the high school, for high school students, technically if they are expelled, we are not required to provide education unless the student has an IEP. Then we are required to still supply them with an education. I think in the case of, if we're talking about young children too, if a student has real extreme behaviors or concerns at that age level, they probably likely are a student with an IEP. We would be educating them off-site, in some form. So I guess, I think as a philosophy that we have, and I think all schools have for the most part, is, with a young child, you're trying to nurture them to a better place and trying to, we asked the question of, is expelling them going to be better for them, and not only them, but the school in the long run? Are you going to take an 8-year-old and expel them until 21? Or probably not,
Is there like a threshold, a certain number of instances like Greg talked about? Like 5 times a kicking or breaking windows, or 10? Is there a number?
There's no set criteria, but
At what point though do you?
yeah. I mean, there's other interventions that happen in the space too, where, partial day schedules, where they're offsite or completely offsite. We've had students with offsite education. We didn't expel them, but we're saying you can't be here, or you can't be here for a full day. Or we have worked with parents, and parents will not often, but have sometimes elected to have their child attend like a day treatment facility, and we've encouraged that. So yeah, there's other interventions that we would try to do, because we have to have a safe school environment. We can't have child coming to school and everyone around them is fearful all day. So am I missing? I don't know. Philosophically, this is kind of the general approach. But
Every time we kind of talk about this, it gets a little bit quiet, weird, funny, and
it's a tough topic.
we're trying to understand this.
Yeah.
Craig, I guess my thought, and I think Teresa and I are on the same page with this. If it's a 2nd grader or a 12th grader, in the case that you're talking about a second grader, tearing a room apart, that child is potentially a product of their environment, and so for us to say we're going to send you home and keep you in that environment, I think we'd rather be working with that child.
And I understand that, but I do know that there's kids that have that same problem that come from houses that don't have that problem. So to assume that that's there, I don't think you can do that. And I kind of get a feel, and I see that that's kind of why we go through that. Why the district's spending $100,000 or $50,000 for 5 pairs that we didn't when I was going to school, because these kids can't behave. You understand that? $250,000 a year, and that's a rough number we're spending to take care of these kids that in the olden days we didn't have a problem with for one reason or another, and we keep pulling up against that. We're just throwing more money at it. I'm just highlighting it. I don't know what the answer is, but
Part of state policy too, we have to, don't we?
Yeah. We have to.
Well, can't we expel kids if they're?
We can.
So then it's not state policy.
Well, we'd have to. If it's a student with an IEP, we'd be educating them anyway. So. But again, like I said, there's other things in between expulsion. Off-site, partial day schedules. We do that stuff.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get us off topic. I just wanted to.
Yeah. No.
As long as we're talking about that.
It's a hard topic, and it's not unique to Clear Lake. I can tell you that. Listen to everybody.
It is hard, yeah, especially when you just kind of get a vision of it, like,
It's the challenge of our age right now in education, I would say. It is the top challenge that we face. Yeah. Let's see. What's the next? Search and seizure. So this one,
All kinds of exciting.
clarifying language there in the first page, green paragraph, clarifies that requests for search of a student's possessions directed to a principal or an available administrator, that the administrator typically gets the consent of the student. They don't have to, but it's more of a like, hey, Johnny, I need to look in your locker, or I need you to empty out your backpack for me. There are, however, as it says, cases where there's reasonable suspicion, where the search can be conducted without the consent, and then also recommended to be in the presence of another staff member when conducting. However, if it's a case of real serious concern for health and safety, it can be done immediately without securing those things. So it's reflective of the approach we take. There's no questions on that one. Use of credit cards, use of district credit cards. This one is basically credit card may not be used to purchase alcohol or personal items or services, so you don't use the card for personal items or to buy alcohol, nor is the personal gain of credit card rewards such as bonus points, frequent flyer miles permitted under any circumstance. So if let's say a staff member takes a school-sponsored flight somewhere and they earn bonus points, they don't get the rewards points off the credit card.
Well, even churches get to buy alcohol, Chris.
Yeah, we can't. So, assistive technology and services, saying that if it's used in conjunction with the student's IEP, shall be used with any external communication or recording function disabled, except as provided for in the student's IEP, so that it's not, communicating with others unless it's part of their IEP and it needs to. Student mental health services. To be clear on this one, this is referring to on-site services where we have a third party who comes in and provides mental health services. It's not us providing, but we offer a room. Like we currently have an arrangement with North Lakes right now, and we do that. So that's what this is referring to. District's responsibility to provide a free and appropriate public education for students with IEPs. So the services are consistent with the district's requirements. And it also says that the access can be on-site or virtual. So let's say a student goes in to a room and they have virtual, they connect virtually with a therapist. So, food service, this one might have more green spots in it, but the gist of it is that we have to have someone designated as what's the term? Dietary accommodation coordinator. It's our food service director. It's Tara Petter. So this relates a lot of this to modifications. If a student has an allergy or a specific medical reason why they shouldn't eat certain foods, if they need to put in a request to have an alternate food, that goes to Tara, and she works that out with the families. If there is a dispute about it, there is a process for grievance, where the family doesn't agree with the decision. But basically, we need a note from a medical provider in order to substitute foods for students, because otherwise, the district is taking on an expense, perhaps, to do that. So we don't do that just for food preferences or food discomforts. It needs to be a medical allergy or a medical reason that they can't have it. And then, I guess the paragraph up above refers to that we, serve only food and beverage items that are determined by the compliance with USDA dietary guidelines.
There's a lot of district administrator will and is responsible for. You're going to have to get a chef's hat.
They all say that. Yeah, all those policies say that. I wish they would all say it or designate, because that's what it is. So any questions about that one? And again, obviously this is first reading, so if there's one of these that you want to make a special note of to say, hey, I want to read more up on that, and then bring your questions to the next meeting, we can certainly do that. The next one about free and reduced price meals, the first option there, here. It's been, well, I just looked at these again yesterday, or the other day, I should say. We do provide breakfast here, so that's why we select that one, as well as free milk for qualifying students. At least once that we notify families of, the availability for free lunch, free and reduced, and we certainly do that in multiple ways. Any student who's homeless, foster child, runaway migrant, automatically qualifies for free and reduced, or free, I should say. And if you receive free or reduced meals or milk, you're not subjected to any of those items there. You're not, obviously you're confidential, your names are not shared in any way, and you don't have to use a token or a ticket to get the free meal, or, so there's nothing that would identify a student as a recipient, especially with food service staff should have no idea if a student is on free or reduced, which they don't. So. Any questions about that one? Transportation, again, this is one where they're kind of melding a couple of different policies together. So not necessarily new language, but this is non-routine use of school buses. So let's just say the Boy Scouts say we want to rent a school bus and use it, pay for the use of it, just kind of the regulations about. We could lease it out if we wanted to. We don't really do that. We don't hardly ever do it. We have rarely. Making sure it doesn't interfere with the routine of the regular school services, and it's operated by an employee of the district or someone that we approve as qualified, which we always say an employee, one of our own drivers. If there's surveillance on the buses, so just real basic clarifications. Again, these updates come from case studies or legal cases where they want to just tighten up language a certain way to make it very clear. So, the next one too, controlled substances and alcohol policy for employees that transport students. This was, let's see. Ooh. So there was multiple policies that had mention of this in different ones, and so we're rescinding policy 4162, controlled substance and alcohol policies for employees that transport students, and then transportation for field and other trips, and it's just melded into this one policy here. So scroll down, there's nothing much in here except for references to other policies. And then the last part there, that there's a return to duty procedure. So if an employee was somehow removed or disciplined as a result of this policy, if they were to somehow going to return to work, they had to have a return to work test. But there might be very unlikely if someone violated this policy that they would be returning to work. It's hard to say what. I'm trying to think of a situation where that might be. Last but not least, transportation by private vehicle. Greg, this gets to your question from before. You asked that, right? Yeah. Students are expected to use school-provided transportation. However, parents, including board employees, may transport their own child for district-sponsored activities or trips when the district's procedures for notification are followed and authorized for private vehicle are issued. So we have a procedure in place. So if maybe there's an extenuating circumstance and there's a Saturday game or tournament and a family says, hey, we've got this going on and we're going to drive our own child to the match or the game or whatever, we can do that. Or parents are allowed, to sign their kids out and drive them home from a contest. So that's, we already have a procedure in place. So option 2 was laying the procedure out really specifically. We rejected that because we said we already have a procedure, and so that's when we picked option 1, the simpler one. So. Questions?
Yeah, because I can remember back in the day we'd ride in the Bronco too to basketball tournaments. You know what I mean? So just so you guys have the levity to do, the flexibility to do the things that you want to do.
Most stuff comes down to parental permission, insurance permission. insurance wants to not take a risk on some driver or vehicle that they don't know if it's safe or not. And obviously parental permission for everything. So we made it
Nice.
through, and it's almost 7, but we made her.
Let's get out of here then. What do we got left?
Superintendent notes.
All right, give them to
We
us,
can make
Chris.
those quick. So future agenda, just coming up ahead of the next meetings, we'll have some more Neola updates. We'll have the audit report, I think, in January in time for the early January meeting. I told you about an ESSER summary I got coming. And in January, another important job we do is we set our open enrollment capacity for the 25-26 school year. But anyway, we talked about conferences already. Just some professional development stuff that's been going on. That's a heavy thing in the fall. Mr. Rosine went to the Athletic Directors Association Conference and Behavioral Threat Analysis Training. Being new to his administrative position, he didn't get to do it prior when the other admin team did it. Mrs. Anderson and Mrs. Gillick are doing Ames Web Plus training, the new Act 20 assessment. So they went and got trained themselves, and then they're now training the rest of the staff. Lots of opportunities up to CISA 11, having consultants come here, but also individuals going up to CISA 11. As an administrative team, we attend networking groups there. I've mentioned before the meeting, we're going to the Slate Technology Conference the next couple of days, focused on artificial intelligence. The art club and the VAC are firing up, so our new art teacher, Ms. Skolecki, is going to get the art club going here. She's got her feet under her now as a new teacher and going to do that. We had some kids participate in Lakeland Honors Band and Choir back in November. That was awesome. We got winter sports rolling along in full swing here. We've started the bidding process for property and casualty insurance. That'll come to you in February, and we'll approve it for a March renewal. So we are bidding it out this year. Other cool things that we had. Wendy Scoggins Community Ed coordinated a mobile planetarium evening night for adults to come to, and it was a big hit. People really liked that. We got the music concerts going on here for the middle school tonight, senior high next week. We got the elementary kids December 19th. That's always great. We're going to have our staff holiday party on the 19th as well, and then a well-earned holiday break for staff, so kids. So anyway, so that's some quick highlights. And as always, every time of year, there's always something good going on. So.
Nice. Future agenda items. Anybody have anything they want to put on an agenda?
Well, just going to the, we're coming up with the school board conference, and it's usually pretty heavy with a lot of things about tech ed and stuff like that. I'd love to, maybe get a tour of the tech ed program and some of the curriculum. I don't know if we can still do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Be kind of neat to see what we got compared to what's out there and before that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's possible or not.
You ready to Tom?
You want to do a spotlight?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a spotlight on an ed or something. We could do a tour.
Yeah.
It's been a couple years since we've done that. Yeah.
When's our January meeting compared to the end of the quarter?
It's before the end of the quarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because like Woods class and stuff has their projects, so it would be nice to see some student
Yeah,
projects
January
too.
13th. Yeah, January 13th.
Yeah, canoe is about 3 years.
I know. I saw that back there.
It won't float yet, but it's.
It's not even close.
No. And maybe we could combine and do tech ed and ag and just do both, all shops.
Cool. All right, anything else? All right, then I will entertain a motion.
And move to adjourn. Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.